Want some insider tips on how you can start your own profitable niche community?
Now, less as being a true, peer-to-peer kind of knowledge sharing community, and more like, hey, let's just start by sharing what we know and be able to have some conversations with people in the process.
And a list of benefits to get you truly motivated.
I always say you become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And so I wanted to surround myself with other people who were, doing the types of things we were doing so we could share that knowledge and deals and various things. Like I've had people get married from meeting at my events. I've had hundreds of millions of dollars in deals that have happened from people being part of the community, business partnerships, friendships. So I was able, because of Rhodium, to acquire that business for kind of mid 5 figures and grew it with the support of the community and ended up selling it for multiple 7 figures. And when you build relationships first, good things tend to come as a byproduct.
Get ready for another inspiring episode of the Niche Pursuits podcast, this time with Rhodium founder Chris Yates, bringing you tips on building awesome communities. Before we jump into the podcast, I wanted to let you know that today's episode is sponsored by Search Intelligence. Here's a short clip of Ferry from Search Intelligence showing you how their agency built digital PR links to a client's website.
In this video, I will show you how we landed a placement on BBC and dozens of links in massive regional online publications such as Wales Online, Daily Post, and many more. This PR campaign was about the easiest place to pass your driving test for the first time in the UK. This is how we've done it. We simply went to DVLA website, found the latest car driving test data by test center, and downloaded the data in a CSV format. Once we had the data, all we had to do is to look at the number of total tests per test center, then look at the number of first time passes to calculate the percentage of people who passed their test for the first time. Once we had the percentage numbers, we created a press release with our findings. Then we went to Roxhill and found journalists who talk about driving tests, and also looked for journalists who write in regional publications in the UK. In total, we have found about 1,800 journalists and sent them our press release by email. Within less than a day, our story got picked up by BBC, Cornwall Live, Wales Online, and dozens of other publications in the UK, providing our client a tsunami of backlinks perfectly relevant to the audience of the client, who is a specialist in learner driver car insurance. I hope this video is helpful and it shows you how you can also build links with freely available data from official sources.
If you want similar link building PR campaigns for your website, head to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them now. All right, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. My name is Jared Bauman, and today we are joined by Chris Yates with Rhodium. Chris, welcome on board.
Hey, thanks for having me, Jared. Excited to chat.
It's good to have you. And it's funny because on our agenda, obviously, we're going to be talking about your development and growth of Rhodium. And I think a lot of things that come out of it as it applies to the listeners, they're going to get a lot out of what you have to share. We kind of were working through an agenda. But I noticed that before you founded Rhodium, you had Centurica, which we had Nate Ginsburg on probably about a year ago. So there's a lot of parallels here to some things we've already talked about. But I'm excited to hear your story and kind of learn from you. Welcome on board. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and catch us up to where the story starts for today.
Sounds good. Yeah. So I guess the quick story for me is I started buying online businesses after owning a digital marketing agency and realizing that I was not building I was building everybody else's businesses and not building assets that I could kind of own and control. So started buying online businesses. This was like back 2009, 2010. Built up a portfolio and ended up selling the agency because I was enjoying the portfolio. And ultimately that kind of led me to feeling a little isolated. I live in Montana and there's not that many people here that do what I do for a living. So I wanted to connect with others. And that's kind of how Rhodium ended up starting. Is around 2012, I decided to bring people together who were doing what I was doing at an in-person event and do that in Vegas every year. I've been doing it now for like 11 years or so. And that actually came before Centurica. So I'll just to make sure we tweak that comment. But so that's kind of like the beginning stages of Rhodium.
It's interesting because you mentioned, I run an agency myself, and nowadays, even having an agency with everybody spread out all over the world can be a little bit lonely. And then obviously growing your own your own websites or building your own assets is a digital job. I mean, how did you, I guess in the beginning of Rhodium, how did you have an idea or a sense that people wanted community? Was it something that you were hearing feedback on, or you just kind of roll the dice and take a chance on it?
It was more rolling the dice and taking a chance on it. So what we did, I had a business partner at the time who I since bought out, but he had some experience in the event space, and so I was able to let him convince me that it was a good idea. And for us, when I thought about it, two things. One, just being able to talk to other people who were doing what I was doing, be able to share that knowledge was one. Two is, we actually kind of very meta. We bought a business, a online business that was teaching people how to buy businesses. So with that, it came with a email list and kind of a forum and things like that. And so we were like, hey, how can we, kind of expand this and continue to, I guess, build our name and awareness of who we were, as well as maybe, that would lead to some deal flow or some other interesting opportunities, being kind of, I guess, a connector within the space. And we didn't really see anybody that was really doing that yet. And so we figured, hey, it's worth a shot. Let's try it.
I feel like community or building communities is coming back in vogue a bit, or I'm not sure if it ever went out. Style isn't really my thing, as you can tell. So, but excuse the style reference. But I mean, from the beginning, like you were basically building a community, and doing that maybe before. Like a lot of people listening might think, well, we'll build the website first, or we'll build the brand first, or we'll build the traffic first, we'll build the interest first, and then add the community. Maybe touch on the process you went through to build and validate the community, because it doesn't sound like it followed necessarily that path.
Yeah. I think back on it. We had that initial list from the business that we'd acquired, the training business. We had our experience of actually being in the trenches, acquiring and growing these businesses. And so at a minimum, we had the ability to bring people together to learn from kind of our experiences. So it really did start out less as being a true, peer-to-peer kind of knowledge sharing community, and more like, hey, let's just start by sharing what we know and be able to have some conversations with people in the process. So I think there's something to be said about if, I kind of think about positioning wise, if you're going to build a community, you can position it like, I know nothing and I'm getting smart people around me to be able to help one another, and all boats, or the rising tide lifts all boats type thing. Right. So that would be like a positioning that I think anybody can do if they're still, if they don't have a lot of experience, but want to surround themselves with people. The other would be like, hey, I have some experience that I'm willing to share. I'm not necessarily the expert, but like I have some knowledge to share, and this can spark conversations to get other people who are also in the trenches doing this work to share along with us and be more of a peer-to-peer model. And then the third would be more of like the guru model. Think like Tony Robbins, where, they are really there to see him, and their community is a big part of it, but like he is the show, right? For me personally, I was sort of in the first of the two buckets when I started, because I didn't really want to be necessarily like any kind of guru. I definitely was more behind the scenes kind of person, but I love the idea. I always say you become the average of the people you surround yourself with. And so I wanted to surround myself with other people who were, doing the types of things we were doing, so we could share that knowledge and deals and various things.
So maybe like catch us up on where Rhodium is today, what it looks like, and then we can kind of get into the story as it unfolded. Because I mean, it's, like you said, it's 11 years old, so I'm guessing there's quite a bit to the story as you've grown it.
Yeah. So, I started it out, kind of like I said, teaching people, kind of doing what I was doing. And then people after the first event or two were like, hey, how can we stay connected between events? So I started an online forum because that was what the community was asking for. And over the years, I do things with the community that most sane people wouldn't do. So I actually meet everybody on like a Zoom call typically before inviting them in, just to make sure it's a good fit on both sides. And, that actually that investment up front has been really key, because, as the saying goes, one bad apple can ruin the bunch. And if you're not careful with communities, you can get people who are in there to just take and self-promote and things like that. So I work really hard to kind of clear that out. So that's been a really key, point along the way, was just meeting those people, finding out what their needs were, getting them involved and engaged in that community. And then, the business model as it stands today is that Facebook group, I don't charge for it. It's like, there's about 1,000 members in there, and that's really grown through word of mouth. And then I do an annual in-person event. I found that when you take people who have met offline and then take them to an online community, that pairing is super important to build that, and at least that core group who really kind of understand one another. They have trust with one another and things like that. So kind of combining those two things in various formats have been really, really key as well, in addition to the interviewing that I do. And then what I do to monetize it, and it's cool to get paid to do something I would do for free, is kind of how I think about it. But I do, it helps to justify the time to actually make money from this. So I charge for the in-person event. And the model with in-person events, usually you either have kind of attendees pay for things. So they would pay for a ticket, and that kind of covers your costs and lets you make money, or you have sponsors, or you have some combination of the two. I'm definitely more heavy on the attendee, kind of funded with a little bit of sponsorship. And then coming out of COVID, I realized that having your business built around a single in-person event that happens once a year is not necessarily the most, what's the word? You have a lot of eggs in one basket, to put it simply. I
was going to ask about COVID. Yeah.
Yeah. So I started something called Rhodium Remote, which is kind of like a mastermind format where we group people together based on their businesses and help match make and things like that. And we do regular Zoom meetings and have a separate channel and stuff like that. So that's nice because it adds a recurring revenue component to the community and allows me to justify, spending more time to help those people who are a part of it, and have a little bit more infrastructure around all of that. And it's a great model because literally, I love it because I've had people get married from meeting at my events. I've had hundreds of millions of dollars in deals that have happened from people being part of the community, business partnerships, friendships, so I get to challenge myself as well. It kind of hits every element from, being able to pay bills all the way to making an impact on people's lives. So I love doing it.
Who's the what's the avatar of the typical, say, attendee or a person who comes to the weekend event?
Yeah, so it's going to be one of four main business models: e-commerce, SaaS, content/media, and services. So all digital business owners. Typically, they're owner operated. They're running a profitable company. Revenues anywhere from high 6 to mid 9 figures, with our typical member kind of low to mid 7.
Okay, good. Yeah, wow. Probably the similar 4 buckets of interviews we have here in the podcast in many ways. And I will say, I haven't kept track because I never really know, but I know that we've interviewed a lot of people from the Rhodium community here in this podcast, different success stories or different business models that attend either the weekend or online and those sorts of things. So it's clearly attracting successful people.
Yeah, Spencer's been a fantastic member of the community for years. And I don't know if he told his long-tail pro story and how Rhodium fit into all that, but that was kind of a cool little thread. Maybe you could ask him about it at some point.
I will have to. Spencer took a little vacation here from the podcast, but now we do a weekly session on on the weekly news, and that's where I get to ask Spencer questions live that nice. We'll make him tell a good story. So I'll throw that at him. So why don't we go back to how you've grown this? And I know you have had you kind of teased it a bit, right? I didn't know about the wedding, by the way, or the marriages, but I do know about all the deals that have happened and certainly some of those stories. If you take us back and let's start back at the beginning and how you've grown this, but really what it's led to for you. And I think that's what I want to encourage everyone to listen into. I don't have all of the script here in front of me, but I just have a couple talking points about what Chris is getting to. And I think that hearing what Chris is going to talk about in the threads in between it, the value of community and how that can play a role in your business, that's to me the meat and potatoes and the really, really intriguing part of your story that I think you're going to get into here.
Yeah, and I can give you the headline. So in addition to being just an awesome business to run, it's given me some interesting opportunities as well. So you mentioned Centurica. So I was able, because of Rhodium, to acquire that business for kind of mid 5 figures and grew it with the support of the community and ended up selling it for multiple 7 figures. And all of that was a result of me, first making the decision to build community around me. So we can dive right into Centurica if you like, or if you want me to give more details on how we got to that point, let me know.
Yeah, let's pick up where Centurica kind of comes into the fray. We had Nate on last year, and obviously he's the one who purchased it, I believe, from you, if I just do my timelines right here.
Yep.
But talk about what it looks like at the start there, but also, I'm just curious, what does it look like to have a community where these kind of opportunities can come up? But
Yeah, I mean, it's cool because, like I work hard in the community to build a culture of giving and paying it forward. And so, it's when you build relationships first, good things tend to come as a byproduct of it. That's kind of how I think about it. And so, after doing the event for a few years, one of the original founder of Centurica, which was not me, I bought it from him. He had come out to do a talk at Rhodium. He'd been a member of the community, and he was ready to kind of, like, using a baseball analogy, he saw Centurica as like, this is like a base hit for me. I'm looking to do like a home run. And he was looking for, really high scale business that he could do. And so he's like, yeah, it's time for me to kind of move on from Centurica. And there's two people in the world I would sell this to. And Chris, you're one of them. So we ended up, he approached me and we came up with a deal that was kind of a no brainer for me. And if you think about it, the fact was that I had a built-in community there who already had, let's just say, an affinity towards buying online businesses. And Centurica, what it is as a business is, and if people haven't listened to Nate, it's a due diligence company. So when somebody's buying an online business, they'll go to Centurica to have them look over the financials to make sure they're legit, to really understand the traffic and the revenue and make sure that's all sustainable. So real estate analogy, it's like the property inspector in a real estate deal, right? So it made sense that if I had this kind of I had a little bit of a reputation in the buying and selling community. I had this captive audience in Rhodium. And for me to buy a company like Centurica that would be supportive and, kind of help people make safer decisions in their purchases made a lot of sense. So that's the first unfair advantage. The fact that I had built that reputation, the fact that I had, built that relationship with the original founder of Centurica, he had trust in me. He saw, that I had a platform. I was one of the two people that he was willing to sell this business to, because it was kind of still his baby a little bit, and he wanted to make sure it went to somebody in good hands. So had I not put myself in that position, that deal never would have happened.
It's interesting to hear you talk about that. I mean, do you think that had more to do with the fact that you were in the community or the fact that you were running the community, if you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, both. And so I don't know that it's an either or, because I've seen members of my community have similar things happen because they're in Rhodium. It's almost like you have an instant trust factor. Like if you were, I wasn't in fraternities and stuff, but like I have this idea in my head that like, oh, you were also in that fraternity, instant trust, instant rapport, right? I think it can be true. Like maybe it's the same with Niche Pursuits audience where, oh, you also listened to, Jared on his podcast, instant rapport, instant trust, right? So I think that's true there. I think specifically the fact that I was in that position and I had organized this community and built that relationship. I think, I don't think it was the only way that it would have happened, but I think it definitely helped, because I think he saw in me somebody who'd put themselves out there, who had a reputation that he wouldn't just go screw up the business totally and kind of like do whatever I could to make a buck or whatever. So I think I had a track record that he could publicly see. So I think that was helpful, but I don't know that it was required.
No, and the reason I asked is because kind of connecting some of the dots, like the dots of you investing up front in this community by, as one example, interviewing people before they come in and join, right? Like they're willing, ready and able to give you their money, but you're staying, let me, kind of interview, get a personal connection, establish that. I'm just hearing threads of that in your community building. There's purpose. And then what comes out of the back of purpose comes with an opportunity that perfectly aligns with what you do. It's interesting to see that that's the aside that came from the community you built almost.
Yeah, absolutely. It's true. And it's hard when we talked about before the show, how communities are hard to justify when you just look at the ROI directly, because it is very much that butterfly effect that you just can't predict. Like who would have known that this one person that I would have met at one of my communities, that would have led to a really good outcome, and who knows that the business partner that I ended up working with to start, Rhodium and all that, like that all these things would come from it. So it is truly more challenging to make that. But so, I mean, if you can make it at least break even and knowing that these opportunities will come when you build community, I think it's great. The other interesting thing I think about communities is in terms of, I guess, connecting the dots is that like community is, it isn't like a tactic or a hack. like humans at our fundamental core need to feel accepted and to be part of the tribe, right? And that creates so many like brand connections. And the more, I think, over time, as we see more and more commoditized, for instance, content publishing or commoditized products in e-commerce, like being able to have a real connection with the company behind it is going to be a real competitive advantage. And I think community is one of the best ways to do that, whether that's an online community or in-person events or whatever. So yeah, it's an interesting piece that you're bringing up.
Maybe to double down on that point you just made, or some of the points you've made recently. A lot of people listening, I'm going to just try to speak on behalf of some of the audience. A lot of people listening right now are seeing, 2023 was rough in that maybe a channel of traffic or growth they counted on has changed a lot this year. And in many years, I could be saying that about every year for the past decade, as
Right.
things have changed on social media with organic traffic and whatnot. But certainly this year, we've had landscape changes for a lot of people in terms of how organic traffic is distributed. A lot of people are thinking about other ways to generate traffic, to generate potential revenue down the road, to generate interest, eyeballs, right? Community might be on the table. Like, how does someone evaluate it in terms of an ROI position? Because you spoke to how hard it is to justify the ROI of it when you can't predict that you're going to meet someone whose business you're going to buy 2 or 3 years into starting a community. You can't justify maybe starting a community without that ROI component, without the return on investment planned out, but it's so impossible to predict who you're going to meet. How do you do you have any tips for people to use to evaluate whether community makes sense for them as a decision going forward,
And just to clarify, if they were going to start a community around their brand, yeah. So what I would say, the first thing that I would think about is, can I get 5 people from my customer list, my leads, whatever, who are actually interested in engaging in some form of community? And it doesn't even have to be, this is going to be 1,000-person community vision. It can be, hey, let's just get together once a quarter and chat. But community, in my opinion, really starts with a core group of people who are engaged enough to have a conversation with one another. So from an ROI perspective, you're really just justifying, is the time worth meeting these people once a month or once a quarter enough to justify the time that I'm spending on doing that, right? You have a lot of options that can open up if that assumption that these people want to get together and share knowledge and experience is actually true, right? But like, let's say we had 5 people and they were maybe your best customers. You do your Pareto principle. You look at your top 20% of customers who are generating 80% of your revenue and say, hey, I want to put together, like a customer mastermind or focus group or whatever you want to call it that, is benefit to them. I want to connect you with other people who are really successful with my product, service, et cetera, that you do. Then what you end up having, and this has happened to me so many times, is like, you get to learn those new tactics and how people are reacting to these big, sea changes of AI and all that kind of stuff. Like, you get to talk about those problems and you don't feel like you're so isolated. So there's like an emotional ROI because of that. But the tactical is, oh, I just learned something from person A that I can then apply to my business. And you, as the leader of this group, you can also ask about how you can improve as a business. You can get that real feedback from your power users and implement that to make your business better, whether it's customer service or other opportunities and things like that. So if you just started with 5 people and all it was for you was an ability to talk directly to your customers on a regular basis, your best customers that you want more of, that alone, in my mind, will more than justify any ROI you get from the benefits you get from insights that they're giving you and lessons learned with conversations and problems that they have that you can maybe help them solve.
You just sparked my memory. I think back to my last company, which was a photo editing company, and I started a group of people, basically some power users, in the hopes of it was getting them together to hopefully help them evangelize the product. And you're exactly right. While there was some product evangelization that happened, there was some good marketing that came out of it. More than anything, I just learned about all the problems our product had that I didn't realize, or all the things we could improve on in terms of communication with customers, all the little things that bugged people that I didn't really realize were that big of a deal. It's a good point. That was kind of the first stuff that happened, not the evangelization or the marketing.
Yeah. And this sparks something for me. I see it all the time in my community where somebody will have a business and they will go to the community to ask a question that they should go be asking their customers that same question, right? Like, are these people like, let's say they sell, I don't know, HVAC parts or something like that, right? And they're asking a bunch of online entrepreneurs, like, is this the right decision I should make with my HVAC e-commerce business? And like thinking to myself, can you just ask that same question to your customers? And this gives you an opportunity to be able to do that. It's like a no-brainer thing that people should be doing is, talk to people who actually can use your service. And this gives you like a direct line into doing that.
Hey everyone, Spencer here, founder of Niche Pursuits. Are you adding a new internal link pointing to each article you publish? You should be. Ever find it time-consuming and a bit overwhelming? Remembering what content you publish and deciding which anchor text to use can be a real headache. What if there was a better way? Well, that's exactly why I created Link Whisper. Simply click Add Inbound Internal Links, and Link Whisper will scan your site in seconds and suggest the most relevant links with appropriate anchor text for your new article. Now simply check the box next to the internal links you want to add, and Link Whisper will add these links for you. No need to go into each article, edit, and add the link. It's already done. No more manual internal link building or guesswork. Just efficient, accurate linking that saves you time and improves your SEO. Transform your content strategy with Link Whisper. Start linking smarter, not harder. Use the coupon code PODCAST for $15 off. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use coupon code PODCAST to get $15 off.
As you kind of bought Centurica and started to grow it, I mean, anything along the way that you can share with us that helped you grow that brand? I mean, I am transitioning a bit, but let's be honest, the vast majority of people listening love to hear tactics about how to grow online businesses. And that's what a lot of people listening, and Centurica will obviously apply in a lot of ways to people who are listening, and kind of any strategies you used along the way to grow it.
Absolutely. So the first one that comes to my mind is, and this comes from talking to your customers. So it's not a total departure from what we were talking about, but so what I was doing in Centurica in order to learn better, because originally the model of Centurica was to be very productized and just do all the ordering online. So after I acquired it, I wanted to find out what were these people actually doing? Like what kind of businesses were they buying, all that kind of stuff. The prospective clients, right? And kind of cast a little bit wider net than just the people who are ready to buy. So I started doing more lead generation and doing more discovery kind of sales calls. The book that I read that changed the way that I look at those sales calls and made me feel like they weren't actually sales calls, but actually like, I'm just here to help you and I'm not trying to sell you kind of thing, is a book called Spin Selling. So I applied the techniques in that book. The key one being to really discover what is the problem and what is this implication of this problem. And that helped us, close more deals and things like that. But what it more importantly did was when I bought the business, the pricing was typically around $500 for a due diligence project. And that was priced right for people who are buying maybe like a $20,000 or a $50,000 website. But then I started talking to people who are buying like $1 million business, like an online digital business, right? And they're like, $500, that can't be good. That was the feedback I was getting on those calls. And so I'm like, okay, $500 isn't good. And this became the other key principle, which is you start to recognize that you can start to go up market when you start getting this kind of feedback. So where we were originally were people who were buying like $20,000, $50,000 sites, and they were really just kind of learning and business opportunity seeking and things like that. Then we started getting people who were like, this was going to be my career. I'm taking out a loan to buy this business and it's going to be my life. They had a lot more to lose. They had a lot more pain if this deal didn't go right. And so the difference in value between those two people was substantial. So what I did was I created a package which was 10 times the price of the 500. So I created a $5,000 package. And that was for these people who wanted more hand-holding. They wanted like that high touch service. So I just basically threw everything I could think of in the kitchen sink into that package, just thinking no one would buy it, right? Literally in the first 6 months after launching that, the business grew by about 500% because people wanted that business. Then a new problem occurred, which was that I had had promised all of this stuff and I had to fulfill on it. And I was like, okay, either I got to stop selling or I got to change this or something. But, so that created more like operational issues that started to come up. But the cool thing was by charging more, I now had more margin to put into team to help me actually fulfill on the services instead of having to do it just with a couple people and a contractor. So that was the first key like strategy, looking to go up market, offering a higher price product. Worst case is nobody buys it, but your other $500 one now looks cheap and you probably get more sales on that one. So that was the first growth tactic that we used. And I kind of was kicking myself because I didn't start that until like 6 or 12 months after buying the business.
Oh, some good pricing strategies right there, man. I used to speak publicly on pricing strategy, and I love nerding out on that kind of stuff. I can only imagine how well it worked. Like how did you tap in? Just since we are kind of focusing around community here, as you grew Centurica, did the community help in any additional ways? Whether it's people, whether it's processes, whether it's growth, I'm just throwing some ideas out there. Anything else that you used in the community to grow it?
100%. So number one, when I acquired the business from the original founder, he was leaving and his other business partner who was active in the business was also leaving. So I knew that I didn't want to do all of the work myself. And so I was at one of my Rhodium events in 2015. And a gentleman named Brian Diener, who ultimately became my business partner, was one of the attendees at the community. And I started talking to him. Hey, I'm buying Centurica. I'm looking for somebody who might, be able to help me operate it and stuff. And so he came on as like a contractor to start with, just on a project basis. And he was a key first person there to actually help me, allow me to focus on sales, and he focused more on the fulfillment of the work that we did. And so it was a really good pairing there. And ultimately he became my business partner in the company, not just a contractor, and helped me grow it to the point where we were able to exit it. So again, without that community and that relationship that came from the community, that wouldn't have been possible. One little thing I learned with business partners is if you can find somebody who has a kind of is the yin to your yang. So Brian was very much, hey, let's make this thing efficient and let's not start a bunch of new stuff and let's keep this thing operating really well. I was much more, hey, let's go launch the next product and I have the ideas and things like that. So that actually worked really well as a pairing. He was much more of like the finisher and I was more of the starter type. So that was just a really helpful lesson on business partners. If you can find your opposite, that sometimes that can be a really good thing.
I couldn't echo that more. I have the same in my business. So take us up to, because obviously, I don't want to short circuit the story, but at some point you ended up selling it to Nate.
Yes.
Who, again, folks, we'll link to his podcast episode in the show notes. I can't remember exactly where Nate picks up on the story. Because the interview was a year ago, but I'm guessing it's right around the time he bought it because I know we focused on Centurica. But how did that deal develop? How did you realize you wanted to sell? How did it come to be? And again, I'm curious to hear how you met Nate.
Yeah. Okay. So let me just fill in a couple quick gaps. In terms of how the community also helped grow Centurica was I got clients from the community because people had that, that trust there. So if you can take a community and monetize it by offering some kind of a back-end service or offering, that's a really key piece. That was really crucial for Centurica to both get referrals and word of mouth customers, as well as direct customers from the community. And to build that reputation. And then what happened was, after growing the business to a certain point, we caught a wave. And so I don't know if this has come up yet in any of your past podcasts, but the wave that I'm speaking of is a whole bunch of money went into funding Amazon aggregators. And we caught that wave because after the prior 5 or 6 years of building Centurica, starting with people who are doing $20,000 deals, then $1 million deals, $5 million, $10, et cetera, to $1 million. We were able to catch that wave of all this money coming and people needed to hire help for due diligence. And they started comparing us to like a PricewaterhouseCoopers who charge, $50,000 to $500,000 for a due diligence package. Pretty soon we started looking cheap and we saw an opportunity to go up market. So directly as a result of the community, being supportive and referring and all that kind of stuff that happened. So we eventually got to the point with Centurica where we're doing over $1 million a year in profit. And it was like me and Brian and like a team of contractors. And we really made this thing efficient and profitable. And we were at a decision point where we could either reinvest, put a bunch of overhead in the business, and hope that this wave continues to go in the future. But neither Brian and I had a lot of experience building big teams and systems and stuff, and we had this really profitable business. And I think that it's pretty common, especially for agencies and service businesses, to have this chicken or egg scenario where it's like, we need more people to pay for the clients, but like getting more people takes money out of our pockets and we don't know what's going to happen with it. It's like this weird chicken or egg. So, we were like at a decision point. Do we reinvest in the business, build out a bunch of processes, build out a team, and hope that the market continues to be really good? Or do we consider, another option might be to sell it? And lo and behold, Rhodium came in again, which is Nate had been a longtime member of Rhodium. Nate, the buyer of Centurica, had been a longtime member of Rhodium, and we talked. He was active in the community, etc. And apparently, it had always been his idea that he wanted to buy Centurica. So he reached out to me again, just top of mind, right? Because I'd been in front of him for however many years he'd been in Rhodium, reaching out to say, hey, any interest in selling Centurica? And we ended up doing the deal. I'm sure Nate told the whole story on that podcast, but that's how Rhodium also fit into the puzzle. So I bought Centurica from a Rhodium member, had a business partner that helped me grow Rhodium. I got a bunch of clients and referrals from Rhodium, and I sold it to another Rhodium member. So if that doesn't show you the ROI of a community, I don't know what does.
And it's a paid community. That's the other thing. It's not like you got a bunch of people together. I know you have a free part of it, but this is all done really within the paid community. I mean, talk about moving up market, even in your own community.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been an interesting one to balance is, you have somebody in the community who is, let's say they're doing 8 figures a year, right? And then you have to decide, like, what is best for the community? Do I bring in somebody who has really early stage questions and problems, or are they better in a different community, right? And so you kind of have to evolve over time with community based on the dynamics of your community. So, you have to find, like, what is the avatar that I'm really trying to focus and help, and problems that I'm trying to solve. And sometimes people at other end of that, somebody who's doing 9 figures, their problems are so different than people who are doing 7 figures in the community. Typically, oftentimes they're not always that different, but oftentimes they may be. And then somebody who's just trying to find product market fit, their problems are very different than people who are looking to scale. So yeah, you do have to evolve over time. And for us, it has meant going up market a little bit, and people who are a little further along in the journey, typically they have product market fit. They're looking to scale, $500K a year and up, sort of thing. So.
I guess maybe I'll ask at this point. I'm curious to get your feedback on going back to people thinking about starting a community. Maybe they've listened to us 30 plus minutes in now, and they're thinking, man, I can see all the benefits to starting a community. What tips would you have for people starting a community? I know you did talk about going to your first 5 people, but maybe more on like a tactical level, like whether it's mistakes you've made or things to pay attention to, or ways to get that first set of traction so you can start to see some ROI on it. Just tips on starting a new community.
Yeah. So that core group is so key, because that's where your conversations come from. The size of the group matters a lot when you take into account how much conversation is happening. So if you have like a really noisy small group, that may feel like, oh gosh, this is not great. But if it's like 1,000 people and there's one post every week, something's going to feel off. So you have to find the right balance of like conversation to number of people. And what I would say is, I think there's like concentric circles. There's this idea in psychology called Dunbar's number. It's basically the number of people that humans can maintain a relationship with. Like, another way to put it is, there's about 150 people that you probably have that you would go and say hi to at a bar if you saw them, right? And so that's like a helpful number, like to think about. But within that 150, there's smaller concentric circles. So typically there's about 5 in your family, your close-knit group. And then there's another circle that's like 45 or 50, and then, goes up to like whatever it is, 75 or something. So you want to kind of grow those concentric circles like with intention, and be really careful that the next person you bring in is going to be additive to the community. If we're talking about like, and again, this is assuming this is a peer-to-peer, more knowledge sharing as opposed to like a guru-led community. But yeah, being thoughtful about how quickly you bring people in. The other thing that you can do if the ratio of people to conversations is not high enough is just start conversation starters. So it can be as simple as like, hey, the helpful content update just came out. Who's been impacted, right? And now you've got a conversation that starts to engage people, and so you can kind of lead and spark those conversations to keep the ratio going as much as possible. The other big thing I would say has been special for Rhodium is actually having a defined set of values for the community. So we have like 4 main values, but one of them is paying it forward. And so that means people are in a giving mindset. So if people are just there, like I basically have a very heavy hand for self-promotion of any kind. There's no faster way to screw up your community than allow people to spam their stuff. So you got to have a heavy hand with it. And that means kicking people out if they are, they're takers instead of givers. Because like as soon as people start seeing that, they're going to bail. So you gotta be really careful about filtering things out with that. So those are a few just like quick things off the top of my head.
You kind of dovetailed it nicely. How do you recommend, or how do you find content to keep people engaged? I mean, you said yourself, like content is a little bit pretty easy to find nowadays, right? And certainly that's where the value of community comes into play. But you have to have something to share to get people in, and this juxtaposition that I think a lot of people might be thinking about as they look to create a community.
Yeah. So here's what I would say to that is you have to think about the positioning of your community. Why does it exist? Is it there for you to share content with your prospective and current clients? If so, the content should come from you and you should be the show. And the where you can monetize something like that is obviously you can drive them to content that then leads to sales. Or if you are the show, people want to be closer to you, and sometimes they're willing to pay to do that. So if you have your own like really common term you'll hear out there is like an inner circle, where it's like instead of it just being an online forum, now they're on live calls and they're doing Q&A with you, and they get to be closer and they pay for that. And maybe you record that, and that becomes recordings that you can then sell access to or something like that. So that would be one positioning, which is like a guru led. Your job is producing content. If it's more positioned as this is a peer, community where like like in my community, the content does not really come from me. I'll share stuff as I have it. Like the story with Centurica, I share that in the community, obviously. But I am not the show. Like the community is the show. So my job is not to come up with content. It's to create a culture and show people that the values of Rhodium are being willing to share and give your knowledge to others. And that's really where it comes from, is setting that expectation up front and having the positioning that people know that like the expectation of this community is to share. Now, if we're looking for tactics around that, I don't personally do this, but there's a great community called E-commerce Fuel. A guy named Andrew Udarian, fantastic guy, who built his community. What he does is when somebody first comes into his community, they're required to kind of write up, like, let's just call it a white paper. So in order to be a full member of the community, they first have to give in order to unlock access to be able to receive. And so that could be a simple thing you start with to help to filter out some of those people who are not willing and able to do that. And, again, you just tie it to the positioning, like, why does this community exist? And then you tie it to the values, and you think about like, what are the actions that are indicative that people are following the values? Commonly, that's going to be they're very sharing with comments when people ask a question and all those kinds of things. And so that starts to become the norm and the culture of the community.
That's good. Have you seen any track record of success with people buying communities? I mean, certainly you ran a company for many years that was all about evaluating things, businesses. I don't know if communities ever made their way into that, or do you just see like, do you see any aptitude for people wanting to buy a community rather than start it themselves?
I have. So the biggest player I can think of that would be in this space, and I don't think the outcome was very good for them, but I think they're maybe still around. It's called Vertical Scope, I believe, and they're basically like an aggregator of forums.
Okay.
But obviously, vBulletin and these old, technologies around online forums have kind of changed, and, Facebook groups and Slack and all these things have kind of eaten up some of their lunch. But that was their whole model, is they go by forums, and they had a playbook for operating those forums. And forums at the end of the day are a community. And so that would be like, if you wanted to study somebody who's done it, that would be the company I would look at.
Yeah. Sold, going back to Centurica, sold that. And what are you up to nowadays? Are you just living the good life once a year, the Rhodium weekend, or take us back to where you're at right now, and kind of what you're spending your time on?
Yeah, it is an interesting. I told myself, and you'll hear this if you ever have an exit that's meaningful to you. People will tell you, don't start anything new for at least 6 months or a year. The number changes, but I told myself I'm not going to start anything new for a year. And I had Rhodium to kind of fall back to. And so when I sold Centurica, it's pretty much in the, whatever it is, 11, 12 years I've been doing Rhodium. I've always had another operating business or portfolio that I was working on in addition to Rhodium. So this is the first time I've ever had the opportunity to just focus on Rhodium. And it's so fun. I'm loving it. I have kids that are, I have a 12-year-old and a 15-year-old and a wife. And so like, I'm in this weird place where I'm like, I love doing Rhodium. I can see myself continuing to do that regardless of other things that I'm doing. I'm also trying to live the good life, as you said, and not get sucked into, starting something brand new and all that. So I'm in kind of this balancing, living the good life for a while. And I think of it as a season, I guess. And it's interesting. You have new challenges to decide. So like now it's like, well, I don't want to sacrifice the good life to go after some potential home run that may suck me into having to hire a bunch of people and all this kind of stuff. But is it really worth it at this point to just go for a single? And so you kind of end up in I don't know, like you have to create new decision filters for yourself for opportunities. And right now my default is Rhodium, and I'm going to wait to see what happens.
Almost full circle back to the person you bought Centurica from, who was who wasn't ready for a single, but was ready for their home run almost.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. Hey, Chris, where can people catch up with you and kind of, either learn more about Rhodium or what you have going on?
Yeah, rhodiumweekend.com, RHODIUM weekend.com. As I mentioned, I interview everybody before inviting them in. So if you want to have a chat, you feel like you could be a fit for Rhodium, that would be the easiest way to do it.
Hey, thank you for coming on board. I think we're going to be talking a lot more about community this year, building it, participating in it, its value to a brand, to a business. I mean, I even think we'll probably have people coming on to talk about it almost like you did, where it wasn't a bolt on to a business, but we see these stories of people just starting a community for the purpose of the community. And so whatever that conversation looks like, I appreciate you coming on and kicking off the year that I think we'll have a lot of conversations around this topic. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for joining us today on the podcast. Just a final reminder that it was brought to you by Search Intelligence. And if you're looking for link building PR campaigns for your website, just head over to search-intelligence.co.uk and get in touch with them today. Cheers.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for listening to the Niche Pursuits podcast. I just wanted to remind you that if you are ready to start building smarter, faster, and easier internal links, you should check out Link Whisper. You can get $15 off Link Whisper when you use the coupon code PODCAST at checkout. Head over to linkwhisper.com and use the code PODCAST in order to save $15. Thanks again for listening.